This past weekend, I rode in the Sorini 25, one of 3 events that are part of the Butte 100 mountain bike race. I've taken on the 50 twice before and was victorious one of those times, but this year I had a few family members that wanted to try out the 25. They're just getting into mountain biking, and I thought it would be a great length for them to test their skills and their endurance. In this video, I'm going to go over the bike I used for this and my setup for the day, as well as how the race itself went, and talk a little bit about what the course is like. So let's get into it. My bike of choice for this race is a Salsa Timberjack, a first generation, with a 29er wheel set. I was potentially going to use 27.5 plus, but after a poll that I posted on Instagram, it was pretty unanimous that I should basically go with 29ers, especially with this Ardent Icon combination. I'm running a 150 mil PNW dropper on it that I stole off of my RSD Mayor, and I'm running an XT 1x10 drivetrain. I do have a Wolf Tooth Goat Link on there so that I can get a little more range out of it, but my granny gear is still a 42 tooth, which is nothing compared to what we see these days in the 12 speed, and then I have a 28 tooth chainring up front. I'm also running a 120 mil RockShox Revelation fork on the front, and it's a pretty good fork for this kind of ride, along with a Wolf Tooth 10mm lower headset cup, which slackens out my head tube angle about a half a degree. So the Butte 100 really has 3 different races. There is the 100-mile length, which is like the main one. There's the 50 that actually has probably more participants. And then there is the Sorini 25. It's a 25-mile course that's a lot more manageable for most people out there. The first 14-ish miles of the course are actually the same as the first 14 miles of the Butte 50, or miles about 50 to 64 of the 100-mile course. But then to shorten it in length, you end up making a different turn in the Thompson Park area and basically heading back the way you came. I'm not sure if they do this every year or just because there are so many participants this year, but we started out on the road instead of in the parking area, and actually headed north and went around on Delmo Lake Road around this camping area. It's a pretty flat 5-mile loop, but there are some small climbs in it, and you end up gaining about 300 feet over the course of that loop. You then pass back by the finish, cross over the interstate, and then head up and over down the sketchy 2-track. As I've said in my 50 video and in other videos where I've ridden on this area, it's not really a super hard descent, but with a lot of people who are still close to each other and the really loose conditions and really torn up by dirt bikes and side-by-sides and stuff, it is a fairly technical descent if you don't really know what you're doing. I actually lost my water bottle on the way down here and had to stop and go back and get it. But I was able to catch back to my brother-in-law Aaron, who I rode the 50 with last time. And this time we didn't really have anything of, let's stick together. He just kind of took off. My father-in-law and my other brother-in-law were a little bit behind us, but they wanted to kind of stick together as well. And we just all said, let's do our own thing. After a little jog through the neighborhood at the bottom, you take a turn up this dirt road here and climb your way up to the Blacktail Trailhead. This is a pretty steep little dirt road right here. Kind of just took my time, decided to pace myself. That was kind of how I approached this whole race. I wanted to be more casual and just, a fun day out there. I did have some goal in my mind of I just wanted to finish in 4 or 5 hours, which really isn't that fast, but just have a fun day out there and enjoy it. I didn't get to do as much training this year and riding, and I'm pretty sure I'm like 20 pounds heavier than I was last year. So it was just gonna be a fun day out there. This is where you first get into single track. It kind of starts out as double track that's older and starting to be overgrown, but you slowly make your way up this ridge, and this is where you get into some of my favorite areas. You get into more into the trees, and you end up at this loop, and at that point it turns into real single track. There are a couple small descents in here, but they're very short-lived. They're not much of a break. It's a pretty continuous climb until you climb all the way up to the top and you hit the junction with the Ski Boggin Trail. This is a very fun trail. I've started to ride it a lot more than I used to in the past because it is so fun. For the most part, it's pretty fast and smooth, but there are some technical sections up at the very top, and as well as the closer you get to the bottom, it tends to get a little more rocky till the very end. Last year was a super dry year, and I noticed in the 50 that the trail was pretty loose and a lot of like moon dust type of dirt in the corners. This year has been super wet, but I think because the 25 starts at noon and a lot of the 100-mile and 50-mile riders had already been through here, it was way more dusty than last year. For the most part, it was pretty interesting. It wasn't what I was expecting. I was kind of expecting it to be in pretty good condition, but when you get that many riders going through ahead, it's gonna, have some impact on the trail. At the bottom, you cross over Highway 2, and then you climb up the road for a second into the Eagle's Nest area before you jump on the trail, and you take that over to the first aid station, which for the 25 is actually the only aid station. So I had only brought 2 bottles really on the bike is all I had planned on, and I figured that would be enough because of this aid station halfway. But in the past, I've had a lot of hydration issues, and so I didn't want to mess up in that way. So I brought an empty bottle in my hip pack, and when I got to this aid station, I was really debating, like, do I really need it? I had seen this unofficial aid station at the bottom right as I crossed the highway, and I knew they had water, and so I thought, I could save myself, not having to carry that water up the hill because there's still some more climbing after this aid station, and just fill at the bottom. And the guy there was like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. He's like, if you want, I can throw some ice in your bottle. And I said, that sounds great. It was starting to get hot, and so I just filled it most of the way up with ice, and that ended up being amazing for the rest of the race because I would just let it slowly melt, and then occasionally I'd reach back, grab that bottle, and squirt some water, very cold, just melted water on my neck. So immediately after the aid station, you drop into John's Gulch. You go down this beautiful single track, you go over some little bridges, some aspens, but it's really short-lived. At the very bottom, it's basically a 180-degree turn. You make that turn and you just kind of climb up the other side of this little gully or this gulch, and at the top you will finally reach up with the Milwaukee Road Trail. This is kind of the central trail for Thompson Park. It was an old railroad and they've converted it into this good walking, biking, whatever path, and a lot of the single track trails branch off of it. So once you hit that, you get a little break. You are riding slightly uphill, but it's not bad at all. You take that all the way over to the Chimney Climb, or Grading Camp is what it's officially called. This is actually a really fun climb. It starts off with a really tricky rocky section that I don't always make it up. So most people I saw, and what I did is I just got off and walked the 15-20 feet, not a big deal. Didn't feel like being a hero that day. And then started making the climb up the trail, which again, it's actually a pretty nice climb. It does have a few little sections that are a little bit steep, but it's all very manageable. They groom this in the winter. That should tell you it's not like it's ridiculously steep. You're riding it on fat bikes, no problem. And as you get to the top, right as you see this old chimney thing, that's where the course splits. This climb is double track, and it is pretty good at first, and then as you get closer and closer to the end, it gets very steep. This was the first time I took any sort of break. I just kind of stopped, collected myself, tried to catch my breath a little bit, took a drink. This was another thing that was very different about compared to the 50. On the 50, everyone was kind of surviving and on their own and trying to do their own thing. The 25 is a lot more, besides maybe the front of the race, I guess. The 25 is more of a have a party, let's enjoy this ride. Everyone kind of chats and, is doing their own thing, taking their breaks, whatever. Way more low key, lower pressure, and so it made it really fun. Once you hit the top, you're kind of it's a residential area in a way. It's just a bunch of homes back there in this little valley, but you immediately turn off of that and you head up to continue into Thompson Park. You got a little bit more of a climb and then it tops out, and then you get to head over and jump on some single track for the beginning of the descent in Thompson Park. You'll end up taking the Crook Camp Trail all the way down. This trail is really fun, really fast, and it does have some tricky switchbacks in there or just some tighter turns. You just got to watch out for those. I missed basically 2 of them, and I ride this trail all the time, so be aware of it. I could tell I wasn't the only one that had done that. It looked like you could see a lot of skid marks as people kind of missed these sharp right turns and almost went into the trees. So be aware of that, but it's a really fun descent, and I wish it was a little bit longer, to be honest. Something cool about this trail is it actually ends on top of one of the train tunnels that you could walk through. So you come over the train tunnel. You would never know that unless you went around and looked, but you're on top of it and it forks to the right. Take that fork, go, and you'll drop onto the junction with the Graham Canyon Trail. Graham Canyon is one of my favorite trails as well. It has a ton of switchbacks, but they're really fun to ride. They're really tight, but they're bermed well, and some of them even have like a little root in them here and there, so they're pretty fun. But you take that trail all the way down, and as I got down to the bottom, I had passed actually a few people on the descent. I am not the best climber. Not that I don't hate climbing, I'm just not very fast, but the descent is where I gotta catch people. So on this descent, I was feeling really good besides those couple of missed turns, and I made it down in a pretty decent amount of time. And I got to that aid station, the unofficial one, and I had quite a bit of water left, but I drank a bunch, emptied one bottle, and then filled it up, drank a little bit more of the other one, had them top that off, and then I was off to climb back up. From here on, you are basically in the 25 repeating what you did. You're just going back the way you came. There's a little bit of a difference at the top of Ski Boggin. Like I said, there's that Blacktail loop. You're gonna take the more eastern side of the loop instead of the western part of the loop that you climbed up. Unfortunately, the climb up Ski Boggin was just really kicking my butt. Like I said, with this bike, it is a 10 speed, and even with the larger rear cog on the back, it still was it wasn't low enough at this point. Everyone, with their Eagle and new 12-speed drivetrains was in their biggest cog spinning up, and most of the people I was around were riding for a little bit, stopping, just sitting there, hiking a little bit, riding a little bit when they could, and there I was with a much higher gear trying to turn it, and I just could not do it. So it was a little bit of a struggle. I did ride quite a bit of it, and I passed, 4 or 5 people on this climb. So I finally made it to the top and began that descent down the Blacktail Loop and then into the older double track, whatever it was that we had already climbed up. I saw a few people here, but not too many. I thought I would see more, but it was a fun descent. It definitely wasn't the fastest I've ever descended here. I was getting a little bit tired, and you start to get sloppy the more tired you get. And at this point, I was really just trying to focus on enjoying the descent because I had that bike coming up soon. I came out into the neighborhood and just decided to take my time to get through there, just drink some water, try and cool down and just get ready for this. I eventually made it over there. There was this guy that was ahead of me a little bit, and I noticed that, as we got into the climb and we were both basically just pushing our bikes, we probably could have just left him at the bottom. Didn't really need him at this point. I noticed that every time I got close to him, he would start to walk away. Pretty sure he had done that thing where in your mind you're like, I can't let that guy pass me, or I gotta pass that guy. And he just did not want me to get in front of him. But I guess I was just a little more consistent, and at some point, most of the way up the climb, I finally passed him. I had ridden a little bit of it, actually, despite just, it being so bad. It had, at this point, basically all 500 riders across the 3 events come across it. So it was extra dusty, extra loose, and still as steep as ever. The good news is though, as you get higher up there, there is one little descent. It's very short, but it's a good break. It kind of lifts your spirits and lets you know you're pretty close. But once you see the cell tower at the top, you know you're real close. The last little bit, maybe 1/10 of a mile, is very steep, very technical. I would guess that most of the people in this race today, they got off and walked up this part because it is ridiculously steep. But once you get to the top, you're basically home free. You're just sitting on the top of the ridge. All you gotta do is ride down this tiny bit of a road, hit the overpass over I-90, and you are home and you're back to the start. So I felt amazing at this point. This was so much easier than the 50. Would I do it again? To be honest, probably not. I think this is a great intro if you haven't done something like this before. I had done the 50 twice, and so this wasn't as exciting to me. I think it could be better if the course was a little bit different. This final climb just is not great. I don't love out and back courses. I would much rather have a loop, but I mean, it's still really fun and a much more low key. If you don't have time to really ride a lot or, you know, commit to the 50 or the 100, then yeah, this is super fun. So I finished at 4:36. That was both the time and the total time that it took me because we started at noon. Aaron had finished about 45 minutes before me. One of the best things though was then my father-in-law and my other brother-in-law, they pulled in like around 15, 16 minutes after me, and they looked great. I know they had been pretty nervous about it, but they killed it. They did awesome. It was really good. Will they do it again? I don't know, but I probably won't either. This one was 27 miles, a little over 4,500 feet climbed, and it was just a great day out there. So while I have made some critiques of the course and basically said I'm not going to do it again, I really would recommend it for anyone who is, you know, looking at their first kind of bigger mountain bike race or ride. Again, I don't actually race these things. I'm racing myself, I guess, but I'm mostly doing it just to finish, to have something to look forward to throughout the year and something to push myself. So hopefully you enjoyed this race recap. If you want to check out more about the 50, go check out my video on that. I'm going to shoot for the 50 next year. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe if I get more training in, I will attempt the 100. If you want to see more of my videos, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.